We are back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to discuss another one of the entertaining games. Not one of the better games, I will say, just an entertaining game just for the simple fact that it was so surprising. The Saints go to 2-0 after a 44-19 win over the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. I'm now looking at the next games I want to talk about. This game, the Baltimore game coming up, and the Tampa Bay game coming up. My picks for all of these games were wrong, and not that I'm too upset. I'm a little bit upset by it because I picked them all of them wrong, but I'm not too hurt by it just because they were surprising. Some of them were very good games. This one, not so much, because I thought Dallas, coming off of last week in a visit to Cleveland, how they looked, dominating the Cleveland Browns, dominating Deshaun Watson, not letting them do, quite frankly, anything in that game. Now, to come into this game, I will admit, I guess a prisoner of the moment because I was riding high with the Cowboys. Dak just got his new deal. They were able to keep CD after the entire offseason where I've been critiquing them. I was feeling good about the Cowboys, thinking that, wow, a win at Cleveland, it's very impressive. So now you go back home. I wasn't too high on the Saints, honestly, just because they beat the Panthers, and a lot of teams are going to beat the Panthers, so I wasn't too sure about them. But, this home opener for Dallas, it looked like a lot like their last home game of 2023 where they lost similarly to the Green Bay Packers 48-32 back in January. Now they have their next home game right after that, and they again give up 40 plus points this time to the New Orleans Saints, and they scored even less points now. They score 13 points less than they did against the Green Bay Packers, and the Saints win it, behind a huge game from Alvin Kamara, and I actually have that information up here for you guys. In case you didn't watch the game or you stopped watching the game, this is what Alvin Kamara's day sort of looked like, right? 20 carries, 115 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 2 receptions for 65 yards, and another receiving touchdown on top of that. Just complete domination. And again, going back to the Packers game in the playoffs, Aaron Jones not having a game up to this level, because I think this is crazy, like 4 touchdowns, almost 200 total yards on the day for Alvin Kamara. You go back to January with Aaron Jones, and he similarly had a multi-touchdown game, a bunch of rushing yards, and the Cowboys were just out of it by the first half in both games. In this game, they allowed 35 points in just the first half, and I think I heard something on ESPN or something like that the Saints scored on their first 5 to 6 drives, and they were all touchdowns, which is crazy because this Cowboys defense should be better than that. But also, like I said before, I wasn't too taken aback by the fact that the Saints put up almost 50 points on the Panthers, just because the Panthers, I would say, are that bad rather than the Saints are that good. But I guess I was completely wrong, because in back-to-back weeks, they're putting up they've almost scored nearly 100 points in 2 games, which is nuts. And I also saw that they've scored on their first 15 offensive drives, all touchdowns as well. So, credit to the Saints. I'll openly say that I was wrong about them through 2 weeks of the NFL, but it's more to say about Dallas, I think, obviously, in this sense, than it is about the Saints. Right from the start, the Saints jumped all over the Cowboys, like I said. They never trailed in this game, scoring touchdowns on their first 5 to 6 drives. 35 points in the first half as well. And from that point on, it completely nullified everything that the Cowboys were about, and everything good that they showed you against the Cleveland Browns was all up in dust. It was just non-effective in this game, because when we were talking about that Cleveland Browns game, I was talking earlier before, and in that sense, with the Cowboys, an impressive win to go on the road, like I started off this segment by saying, but ultimately, I felt like I was more disappointed by the Browns than I was impressed by the Dallas Cowboys. And I think now it kind of shows why, right? Because I think in that first game, I think Deshaun just played pretty bad. Their offense was really not there to compete with the Dallas Cowboys offense. And now, in this game, we have almost more of the same. I don't think the Cowboys played that much better or that much worse on offense, but their defense, and this time around, they didn't have those mistakes by Deshaun Watson, right? It didn't look so poor from an execution standpoint from Deshaun Watson. This time around, the Saints come out and just jump on them, run it right at them, punch them right in their face, right at home, and it really showed up on the scoreboard. And another comment here from Shots Below the Belt: are the Saints for real? The unwritten rule in the NFL is teams don't know they're bad until after week 3. Beat up on bad Panthers team and took advantage of an overrated Cowboys pass rush. Are the Saints for real? Am I ready to say the Saints are for real? I will check who they play next week. That is a good rule. I've never heard that rule, but I think that is a good, benchmark to see where a team is and how good a team is. The Saints, very impressive. I didn't think they were going to look like this at all this year. I definitely didn't think they were going to be 2-0. They play the Eagles next week, so that'll be a good measuring test because I think the Eagles, like I mentioned before, are going to win tonight. So both of them should head into that game at 3-0. That would be a good test to see where they're at. But I think if I had to pick which one they're closer to, I would say they are closer to being for real than they are not being, just being pretenders or something like that. I feel like any team that puts up almost 100 points, and the way that they did it too, running the ball and having everything, kind of sync up to each other, kind of build up to the next play, that's something that I really liked about it. And it goes back to that point, like you said, about the Cowboys pass rush, because back to that first game, they were able to pin their ears back, and Micah, DeMarcus Lawrence, Eric Kendricks, all these guys were stars in the first week, right? But now, when you have a team try to assert their dominance on them, run the ball very efficiently, and just kind of move them back, quite literally, just move their offensive line, move their defense back, just manhandling them from the start. And from that point on, you're playing catch-up, right? You're trying to catch up to the fact that the Saints are 4 touchdowns up in the first half. You're not really so you're not very so successful. You're not benefiting off of your pass rush because they're still running the ball, and Micah, DeMarcus Lawrence don't really have a chance to affect the game from that point on. And that also just signals to me that this Dallas team isn't built to play with any sort of, deficit at any point in this game. From the 2 weeks that we saw, their offense was all right to deal with a very bad Cleveland offense, but a team like this, everybody's talking about the West Coast offense and how efficient it is against the Cowboys defense with Matt LaFleur running it with Green Bay, the 49ers, the Lions, and all these teams. That is accurate, I will say, just from that breakdown, talking about that offense and how the Cowboys really struggle with it. And it just comes down to the fact to me that I feel like when you have a defense like this, and I think Dak kind of mentioned it a little bit afterwards in his post-game press conference, that the offense, kind of struggles when your defense is struggling to stop the opposing offense from scoring so many points. From that point on, if this defense isn't getting those splash plays, those momentum-building plays, like a lot of defenses, but I think more so with this defense, if they don't have a moment where they kind of sense that they could take over this game, or where they get sort of, punched in the mouth, like I said before, then they're kind of shell-shocked. They kind of don't know what to do. And then from that point on, their confidence is a little bit rattled, I would say, at some point in time. And then from that point on, you have these big plays, Kamara trying to get loose or just loose the entire game. And then from that point on, this Cowboys team becomes very enamored with trying to stop the run, and then you get plays to Rashida Shaheed down the field on that long touchdown, another big play to Chris Olave down the field, and then if you're the Cowboys, you don't know where to look or where to stop the bleeding, right? Because you think it's a run, you want to stop Kamara from having a big day, then it's a play action, and now you're too far in front of yourself, and someone's running, 10 yards behind you. It was a great game plan by the Saints overall, to give them their credit. Like I said, I didn't think they would be here at 2-0, but I think it says more about the Cowboys that the biggest thing to me is that they haven't improved from what burned them last year in last year's playoffs, right? This is almost a carbon copy of what we saw in that playoff game against the Packers, right? right from the start, Jordan Love doesn't get touched, doesn't feel any sort of pressure, and they beat him with the pass. Then Aaron Jones gets going, and then this Cowboys defense doesn't know what to do. There's more pressure on the offense, and now more so than last year, this offense doesn't have the playmakers that it should have to kind of compete with a Saints offense now, evidently, a 49ers offense, Lions offense, Packers offense. Outside of CeeDee Lamb, nobody on this team really scares me. Brandon Cooks is all right. Jalen Tolbert had an all right game, but again, they need somebody else outside of CeeDee Lamb, and when their defense is sort of rattled, they can't rush the passer and make plays. They're taken out of the game. Now the running game is taken out of the game. This team becomes very one-dimensional, and I don't think you can rely on Jalen Tolbert, Brandon Cooks to win you games or win you shootouts against the Saints and or any of these other NFC teams. So that's the problem that I see with the Cowboys. The biggest issue is that they haven't improved, and now we've said it all offseason that it's a case where it's great that they were able to keep their playmakers, but because they stayed the same, I don't know how you could expect different results from this team. If anything, they got worse because they lost a lot of pieces this offseason as well. So right now they're sitting at about an average team, a very okay performance and now followed up by a very poor performance at home. It says a lot about, where they stand right now in the inconsistency and shots below the belt that the Cowboys defense spent too much on the field to be winded. What's their game plan for Baltimore? That's where I was getting at. Next week is going to be a very interesting game. They definitely got winded for sure. They spent a lot of time on the field, and it goes back into what I was saying with you're not able to rush the passer at that point in time because first you got to stop the run. If you stop the run, then you can start thinking about pass rushing. But if you're on the field for too long, you can't stop the run, then Mike is going to have to take a seat, kind of catch his breath, and then you kind of lose that element of pass rush, any sort of pressure. So that's one thing. And then for their game plan against Baltimore, Baltimore's kind of struggled a little bit, trying to get Derek Henry going. So if the Cowboys somehow manage to get in front of them, I think it'll help them out a little bit more. Both of these teams, I think, are still struggling to find what they do very well. The Ravens trying to figure out when and how to use Derek Henry. People are screaming for them to use him a lot more, obviously, but I will get into more of that in the next segment, but it'll be an interesting game plan. I think for them, they have to try to establish some sort of running game because they are so limited from the pass aspect of this offense. You need to get like 50, 60 yards from Zeke or Dowd or something like that. Are they capable of doing it? I don't know. I have my doubts, but ideally that's what you would like for this offense to be a bit more of a threat. But it wasn't a threat in this game. The Saints comfortably take this game and now sit comfortably at the top of the NFC at 2-0. Big surprise, but arguably also not as big of a surprise as the next game we're going to talk about. The Ravens dropping to 0-2 after losing at home to the Las Vegas Raiders. We're going to break down that game, what we saw, what we liked, what we didn't like, and is there a reason to panic over the Baltimore Ravens going forward now? We'll answer all of that once we return after this break.